The reason discipline feels impossible for you. You are not undisciplined. You are loyal to your alibi. You perform consistency with failure and call it realism. You call your resistance a trait. You keep it because it protects you. It makes you harmless to your own potential. You build friction on purpose and deny authorship. You move the start line behind a locked door. You stack errands in front of the real task and pretend the pile arrived by weather. You make time heavy, then blame gravity. You keep every hour crowded with rituals of preparation. You call it setting the stage. You never expect the curtain to rise. Your logic is fear in formal wear. You treat the body like a tribunal that must grant permission slips to act. You wait for energy. You wait for clarity. You wait for the day that feels like a headline. You treat neutrality like a no. You obey your delay the way an intern obeys a tyrant. You negotiate with moods as if they were laws. You deliver yourself to them in the tone of a plea. You repeat the script that makes you safe from accountability. You say you are optimizing. You say you are avoiding waste. You say you are protecting focus. You say you would do it right if the conditions respected you. You circle the right conditions like mythic quarry. You place them at a distance that preserves your innocence. The delay stays noble while your life dries out. You hide behind careful language. You assign your refusals to a vague, not yet. You call refusal a preference. You call avoidance a boundary. You call boredom a signal. You weaponize nuance against momentum. This is not sensitivity. This is sabotage curated to look responsible. You believe in a pure beginning. You turn the start into a sacrament, so you never have to begin. You arrange your calendar like a shrine to tomorrow. You keep soon like a charm on a chain. You wear it against your body. You touch it when the truth tries to speak. You do not mismanage time. You anesthetize it. You soften the edges until today slides out from your grip. You are not lost. You are hiding in plain sight. You choose places that tolerate your absence. You select rooms where your promise is enough. You nurture reputations that cash out only in hypotheticals. You groom compliments about potential because they never expire. Results would set a date. Dates would make you answerable. You love the start over because it launders inertia. You burn your plans ceremonially so you can call the ash a clean slate. You curate tools to keep the problem shiny. You change apps like a witness changes names. You pretend turnover equals transformation. You groom the illusion of motion until your mirrors clap. Comfort is your dealer. It sells you painless hours in exchange for your backbone. It calls itself health. It calls itself balance. It calls itself sanity. It convinces you that difficulty is a diagnostic. It tells you if it stings, it must be wrong. You accept this because it absolves you. Comfort convinces you that the absence of friction is proof of alignment. The absence of friction is proof of nothing. The absence of friction is death warmed over. You keep your task close enough to feel virtuous and far enough not to be hurt by it. You sit beside it like a guard dog that never stands. You claim proximity as progress. You reread the same lines that you refuse to cross. You treat preparation like repentance. You believe ritual clears the slate. Days answer with another body count. You have rehearsed your excuses until they impersonate principles. You use language like season. You use language like bandwidth. You use language like capacity. You claim fatigue as identity. You claim chaos as heritage. You present collapse as a personality type. You insist that context is king because the king keeps you feudal. You fear proof more than you fear waste. You protect the shrine of the untested self. You maintain the belief that you could have been lethal. You stroke the myth that the real version of you is trapped under circumstances. You prefer that myth to the risk of being measured. You prefer unlimited potential to accountable reality. You cultivate a life where you can keep saying, if. You exact small punishments against anyone who expects you to deliver. You decorate them with delay. You punish yourself preemptively to claim you already paid. You call your pain evidence of effort. Your pain is evidence of maintenance. You maintain the problem because it justifies your weather. You keep your hands busy in ways that leave no fingerprints. You overclean your edges. You aggressively plan and underperform by design. You shrink big tasks into tiny shameful crumbs and leave them to mold. You call that decomposition patience. Your patience is fear with eyeglasses. You do not fear the work. You fear becoming someone who cannot excuse themselves from the work. You fear the end of exemption. You fear being visible in the aftermath of delivery. You fear what the work will do to your alibi. You fear how loud you would become against the quiet of your own stories. You feed that fear with precision. You keep it well fed because it serves you. You invent parades for interruptions and crown them kings. You allocate reverence to anything that can plausibly derail you. The phone wins. The inbox wins. The sudden urgency wins. You participate in these victories. You set the stage. You rig the trigger. You design your defeats so you can say you were taken. You are not taken. You were traded. You confuse sensation with truth. You treat dread as prophecy. You treat resistance as an omen. You treat friction as a moral referendum. You give a full vote to every spike of discomfort. You give yourself none. You behave like a hostage negotiating with your own hands. The demands always escalate. The ransom is always later. Your body has learned your lies. You train it to flinch at the threshold. You run circuits in the mind and call it thinking. You induce fog so you can claim poor visibility. You install a glitch and then bow to it. You praise technology for saving you from choice. You outsource skin to screens. You outsource will to calendars. You outsource reality to reminders. You made your own absence part of the system. You claim that discipline is a personality that never belonged to you. You narrate yourself as a creative victim. You tell people you do not thrive with structure. You tell them you rebel. You tell them control kills your magic. You pretend your magic ever appeared. You pretend the rebellion is against oppression. The rebellion is against your own demands. The rebellion is a tantrum dressed as ethos. You are not out of time. You are out of permission slips to remain soft. You engineered this from origin to excuse. You remain beneath your threshold because you married your identity to the right to refuse. The right to refuse became the only right you exercise. You act like collapse is consent. You act like drift is destiny. The only destiny here is repetition. You appointed suffering as a witness so you would not have to testify. You raised the volume of your burdens to drown out the sound of your control. You sabotage sleep and call yourself a casualty. You sabotage mornings and call yourself nocturnal. You sabotage evenings and call yourself spent. You sabotage the middle and call it life. You call everything a trait because traits are unarguable. Traits carry your crimes. You keep continuity and call it change. You change the window dressing. You post the image of a new routine like a false flag. You create a narrative of turning the page while marking the same corner with grease. The camera sees rotation. The page stays closed. You stay enamored with choreography. The dance is an alibi. This is not about tools. This is not about structure. This is not about hacks. This is about a contract. You signed it when you learned that effort exposes character. You decided your character must remain unexamined. You placed your future on layaway so you could keep being interesting. You chose to be a cliffhanger forever. You keep failing at the moment of contact. The moment you would make something undeniable, you reassign attention to logistics, context, and noise. You flatten the moment with analysis. You feed it to words. You call it reflection. It is erasure performed gently. You hate the standards you agreed to because they would reclassify you. There would be no more. Almost. There would be no more if. There would be no more indulgence for the myth of the good version of you that lives in the wings. Delivering would blind that version. The stage lights burn illusions. You prefer the velvet darkness. You were told a lie you wanted. The lie said that ease is evidence. The lie said that flow is proof. The lie said that resistance means you are misaligned. You wear those slogans like medals. They cover the holes where your will should be. You built yourself a cushion and slept through alarms until the cushion became a mattress and the mattress became a room. The room became a home. The home became a vault. You now guard the vault with explanations. You keep the key around your neck and pretend the door never opens. You are not a beginner. You are not new to this. You have practiced these moves for years. You have honed your delay to an art. You can manufacture reasons faster than your clocks can count. You can generate emergencies on command. You can flood your mind to make a puddle look like an ocean. You have cultivated fragility as leverage. You are good at this. You are better at this than you are at the work. You have spent more hours designing defense than anyone could pay you for delivery. You live in competence, but you hide it behind static. You keep competence pointed at escape. You make your cycle decorative. You laugh at it. You sigh at it. You tell stories about it. You turn it into a personality feature, so no one will think to remove it. The cycle hears your jokes and grows bolder. It thinks it is loved. It is loved. You cannot claim confusion anymore. You can only claim allegiance. This is your pattern because it protects you from seeing who you are without it. The reason discipline feels impossible is because your identity requires it to be impossible. The impossibility excuses you from betrayal of the earlier you who never started. You do not want to betray that earlier you because you prefer that version. That version is better liked. That version has better focus groups. That version has no record. You keep failure nearby so it can always say your name. You keep effort in the other room so it cannot testify. You keep potential in a glass case and play the siren whenever someone approaches. You look like security. You behave like a thief. You do not steal time. You steal verdicts. You asked for a reason. Here is the reason. You decided that your freedom lives in keeping your hands clean of your own power. You chose innocence over evidence. You keep that choice active every day. You choose it through ease. You choose it through explanation. You choose it through polished avoidance that earns applause. You are the author of your constraint. You love your leash because it makes you pettable. You train your world to stroke you for intention. You shudder theatrically, so they will say you tried. The leash is not attached to anything. You hold it on your own throat. You have been seen. You cannot outrun sight. The glare on your habits does not flicker. The lights have already come up. There is no backstage to retreat to. Your stall moves have been taped and replayed. You do not need a new method. You do not need tolerance. You do not need understanding. You need a charge sheet. It is written. It is brief. It says you chose decay and swore it was care. It says you swore off proof and called it peace. It says you buried discipline alive and posted a eulogy that made you the hero. You hate warnings because they sound like hope. This is not a warning. This is a record. You will either break your pact with comfort tonight or admit you never had discipline to lose. Part 2. You maintain a shrine to your own exception. You talk about your complexity like a court defense. You list your edges like a prayer. You present yourself as rare, therefore ungoverned. You confuse personality with permission. You refuse to be ordinary under pressure, so you choose to be useless instead. You fetishize spontaneity because it absolves you from planning and correction. You love the intoxicating first day of anything because it buries the second day. You want every day to be the first day, so nothing has to mature. You call boredom corrosive. Boredom is not corrosive. Boredom is the door you refuse to open because it exposes whether you will stay for what you chose. You mistake intensity for legitimacy. You believe that when the surge returns, you will act. You deliberately starve yourself of small movement so you can chase a hurricane. You trust adrenaline more than you trust your name. You treat the brain like a stadium that must be charged to capacity. You call empty seats omens. You call half-full betrayal. You walk out instead of playing to the ones who came. You believe in a private jury that will absolve you if you demonstrate enough pain. You collect injuries. You collect misunderstandings. You collect bad nights like stamps. You present them at the counter and expect a passport. You do not travel. You collect. You design your relationship to the task so it can be called toxic whenever it asks you to repeat. You declare mistreatment the moment the work refuses to be exciting. You accuse the task of deadness to defend your flinch. You call coaxing yourself manipulation. You call saying yes coercion. You politicize your avoidance and hide inside the riot. You use language like sustainable to hide screwdrivers and pillows. You pad the edges until they cannot hold tension. You remove heat and then wonder why nothing cooks. You worship comfort as if it were a patron saint of longevity. Comfort has no faith in you. Comfort is neutral. Comfort accepts rot with the same indifference it grants growth. Comfort will bury you gently and call it rest. You practice substitution to avoid exposure. You pick cousin tasks that resemble the real one. You move paper. You edit fonts. You curate spaces. You tweak inputs. You operate the dimmer switch on everything except commitment. You dim commitment to black and claim the bulb is broken. You cultivate plausible deniability like a garden. You plant excuses early. You water them with caffeine and despair. You tend them until they cover the entire fence. You shout across the leaves that the world is noisy. You wail that there is no path through. You built the hedge. You polished the thorns. You outsource contempt to future you. You plan to hate yourself later so you can skip the discomfort now. You send a bill to a version of you that will never exist. You promise that version a war. You never show up. The debt goes to collections. The collector is silence. You claim your standards are too high for consistent action. You call yourself exacting to avoid the mess of reality. You insist the bar is sacred. You never approach it. Your bar is a scarecrow. It frightens away effort. It protects the field of your unplanted seed. It buys you the right to say that you take things seriously while you take nothing at all. You create a theater of weather. You state forecasts for your energy. You name winds. You explain pressure systems. You trace air currents to justify your disappearance. You refine your meteorology until every day storms. You play thunder to drown accountability. The lightning never hits. You make a religion of self-image. You convert every action into a doctrinal test. You refuse to move in ways that endanger the story you prefer. You punish yourself for disobeying the narrative. You call setbacks heresy. You call persistence dogma. You excommunicate any version of yourself that does not flatter the myth you curated. The myth eats. You insist you are protecting your mind. You fear burnout like a phantom. You talk about burnout to justify never lighting the match. You confuse protection with pre-grief. You mourn outcomes you never risked. You cry at funerals for projects you refuse to conceive. You stand by caskets you built from excuses. You weep over wood you cut. You perform being overwhelmed because overwhelm is a permission slip to disobey. You perform being deeply thoughtful because thoughtfulness rarely meets deadlines. You perform skepticism because skepticism rescues you from commitment. You choose exactly the masks that keep hands off you. You keep outcome at a distance with elbows sharpened by theory. You cling to your first wounds as a perfect alibi. You keep them polished and ready. You place them on the table whenever anyone expects you to cross the floor. You ask the room to agree that any ask is violence. You win that agreement from the right audience. You live in that audience. You never leave. You speak about alignment as if it were a celestial event. You talk about seasons as if the planet has sworn an oath to your productivity. You call your misfires synchronistic. You call your halts intuitive. You call every refusal an insight. You build a mansion out of elegant words to house a single chair where nothing happens. You are highly disciplined. You are disciplined at curation, delay, and self-avoidance. You are persistent in your refusal. You are consistent in your explanations. You are reliable in your disappearance at the exact moment the truth would become measurable. You perform discipline in the negative. You show up for absence on schedule. You learn that being seen is dangerous because it ruins the fantasy of being unfairly assessed. You prefer unfair assessment because it provides indignation. Indignation is oxygen for people who never breathe while moving. You choose the high ground because it is the ground that requires no steps. You cultivate superiority that collapses under weight. You never add weight. You tether your value to potential to stay elastic. You like to bounce instead of bear. You love to float instead of carry. You prefer the helium of praise for what you could do over the dense metal of proof. You mainline the drug of being almost there. You overdose on nearly. You wake up in the same room. You tell yourself that control ruins your spark. You keep that narrative because the spark dissolves scrutiny. Sparks look sexy and vanish before a tally can be taken. Flames betray you by illuminating what is actually true. You keep it at sparks. You clap at fireflies. You rebrand delay as growth. You rename hesitation discernment. You call slow false starts incubation. You paint the cage. You hand out guided tours. You point to its spaciousness. You do not hand anyone the key. You keep it under your tongue and speak about destiny. You keep continuity disguised as change because continuity protects the previous verdict. The previous verdict acquitted you of effort. You guard that verdict like a relic. You bring it up in any cross-examination. You avoid new evidence because new evidence would void the old ruling. You prefer the comfort of case law. You treat your life like a settled precedent. You hide your taste for helplessness behind culture. You adopt the rhetoric of boundaries to avoid the burden of action. You identify as burned to claim you are not accountable for the shape of your days. You preach caution to hide desire. You speak about humility to hide fear. You present gentle to evade decisive. You camouflage in virtues you never have to prove. You dramatize your disdain for hustle so no one accuses you of wanting anything too much. You fear being judged for appetite more than you fear famine. You starve on purpose so no one calls you greedy. You present yourself as above the game and then complain when your scoreboard is blank. You claim the moral win and suffer the practical loss. You call the loss noble while you quietly rot. You hate the ordinary path because ordinary reveals who actually shows up. You want a path that flatters your sense of exception. You want a path that makes you feel chosen without requiring choice. You construct a labyrinth that returns to your chair. You call it complicated. It is a spiral loved by a coward. You fear the person you would become if you were consistent. You fear what they would owe, what they would be asked to carry, what they would be able to claim, and therefore defend. You prefer to stay in the soft outline of intention because outlines are immune to collision. You choose vapor because vapor cannot be cornered. You built this air. The reason discipline feels impossible is not mystical. It is not neurochemical fate. It is not cosmic bias. It is not a missed manual. It is a defense of identity. Your current identity would die if discipline lived. So you feed the identity. You starve the discipline. You praise the identity in public and grieve the discipline in private. You enjoy the sympathy that accompanies grief. You collect it and invest it in staying the same. Your habits are not accidents. Your rituals are not incidental. You have authentic power in the precise space where you claim none. That power terrifies you because it implicates you. Your avoidance keeps you innocent. Your avoidance keeps you unreachable. Your avoidance keeps you artful instead of responsible. Your avoidance preserves a person you cannot betray without changing your name. Discipline reveals your true architecture. You do not want architecture discovered. You want decorations admired. You choose lighting over foundation. You choose soundtrack over structure. You curate impression over proof. You treat the truth like an intruder. You lock the windows and cry about drafts. You cannot handle the quiet after delivery because there will be no one to argue with. There will be no system to indict. There will be no villain except you. You prefer a world where you can throw stones at noise. You make noise. You collect stones. You stay busy. You keep yourself just shy of proud, so you never have to field the question of what next. You keep your wins small and ironic. You keep them like trinkets in a drawer. You rummage them in bad moods. You never wear them out where they could change how people treat you. You do not want that change. You want the comfort of being underestimated. You rehearse disappointment to protect it. You already know the door. You already know the hour. You already know the threshold that turns your myth into work. You have stood here before. You built this exact imprint into the carpet. You could trace it in the dark. You have traced it in the dark. You led yourself back to the couch and called it wisdom. You are tired because you spend energy maintaining lies. You are exhausted because you power a lighting rig for a stage that never hosts a play. You are spent because your engines run the pumps that keep the waters of denial high. You are busy. You are not engaged. You are noisy. You are not alive. You hate being spoken to like this because you prefer cake to charges. You prefer ambiguity to naming. You prefer interpretive dance to fingerprints. You built an entire ecosystem where nobody dares name the animal. The animal eats. You do not lack information. You do not lack opportunity. You are not trapped by systems that cannot be navigated. You trap yourself because escape would change the narrator. You love your narrator. You protect them. You let them lie. Your folklore says you are a person for whom discipline never stuck. Your folklore says you tried it. Your folklore says you always return to default. Folklore is religion without obligation. You sing hymns to a powerlessness you enjoy. You lift your hands to nothing and call it grace. You keep dating new methods to avoid intimacy with effort. You are serial monogamy with productivity. You never consummate. You never file. You break up on the first day. The work asks you to stop being interesting and start being durable. You call it irreconcilable differences. The difference is not incompatible personalities. The difference is appetite. You want to look forced. You want the universe to shove you so you can say it was destiny. You want an earthquake to make the road open. You want violence outside so you can claim innocence inside. Nothing pushes. The road remains. Your feet remain still. You describe tasks like tragedies to earn compassion credits. You spend those credits on cheaper days. You trade tomorrow to make today cuddly. You wrap yourself in language and float. Your days drown under the raft. You fear confession more than you fear failure. Confession would end the game. Confession would strip the illusion and reveal the scale of your choice. Confession would make memory regret you. You refuse. You maintain spectacle. You distract your own witness. You carry shame like a relic and show it when expectations rise. You present it to lower the temperature in the room. You play the role of someone who needs shelter from the weather that you schedule. You get the shelter. You extend your stay. You send flowers to the front desk and never check out. Your myth of self-discipline as a finite resource that ran out decades ago is a prop. You carry it every scene. You lean on it when the dialogue is weak. You gesture to it when the plot threatens to move. You deliver your lines and leave. The prop remains on stage. The show never ends. You already understand the cost of what you are doing. You have tallied it in the dark. You have counted years. You have measured private embarrassments. You know names. You know anniversaries. You can inventory the days you handed back unopened. You do not forget. You build altars to them in silence and cry in private like it happens to you. It does not happen to you. You do it. Your identity is the poor child of your fear. Your identity wears rags called humility and sells them as fashion. Your identity bows to every mood and calls it respect. Your identity barricades the door with pillows and advertises safety. Your identity is a concierge for your decline. You hear this and feel clarity. You will try to convert it into a strategy. You want to draw diagrams to show yourself you are serious. You want to reorganize the desk inside your head. You want to alphabetize this indictment. You want to make it pretty. That is the crime wearing eyeliner. You are exposed. You are not persuaded. You are not encouraged. You have nothing to learn from this. You have something to lose. Your alibi. Your next act will expose you as either the author or the alibi. You will defend your delays after this, or you will bury them without ceremony. There is no mercy for the myth. There is no future in the fog. There is no sanctuary in maybe. There is no identity that survives both truth and refusal. You built a species of self that requires drift. That species cannot reproduce in daylight. Light has arrived. The season ends. The reason discipline feels impossible for you is your dedication to the person who cannot be measured. You have protected that person more than you have protected your future. You have chosen to be thought of as gentle rather than to be known as serious. You have chosen to be indulged rather than trusted. You have chosen to be pitied rather than counted on. You have chosen softness as a costume while the steel rusts beneath it. You have reflected their eyes back at them until you forgot your own. The day you fear is not the day you fail. The day you fear is the day you reveal that this was a choice. You fear the moment your voice sounds like authority, because authority removes your last excuse. You fear that sound more than you fear emptiness, so you make emptiness a friend. You go home with it. You let it keep your bed warm. You ask it to speak for you when responsibility knocks. You are the warden of your unfinished life.